Malolo Sufo Moa Malangi e Mama, and welcome to episode 2. Today we're actually going to sit down with a close friend of mine I've known for 21 years. Is a very inspirational photographer. We would call him a brotographer, and he's in the studio with us today. His name is Raymond Sagapolutele. So stay with us, stay tuned, and let's have a conversation.
Stop that.
This is Raymond Sagapolutele, and it's a privilege to have you in the studio, my friend. So who are you, man? Who is Ray? Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, where you grew up, and then we'll just have a conversation about life also.
Malola also. So my name is Raymond Sagapolutele. I am an Aotearoa born Samoan. My parents came over in the big migrations last century. This guy.
A long time ago.
Yeah, back in the 60s and 70s. So mum is from Savai'i, from a village called Fatuvalu in the Safune region. And my dad, he is from Upolu, and his village was Salofata, just outside of Apia. I've had the immense pleasure and joy to have been to my dad's village, yet to get to Savai'i. One day. But born and raised here in Aotearoa. I've kind of lived all over the place. Spent the early part of my life after leaving Ponsonby with mum to move down to Invercargill.
Oh.
And grew up there for the first part of my life, and a lot of adventures down there as a kid. And the weird thing is I remember a lot of that, which surprises a lot of my family. Then we're in the Waikato, staying off of Norton Road in Frankton.
Oh, wow.
Which was a lot of fun. I had two brothers born in the Waikato, proud Chiefs supporters, proud Counties men.
Oh, yeah. I actually didn't realise you were a Chiefs supporter, so you're welcome. Welcome anyway.
Okay, fine.
Welcome to Blues Country.
Yeah, but the majority of my life has, we spent a year in Otara. Loved that. And then we eventually settled in Manurewa, Homai boys to begin with. I'm the last of my family still living in Manurewa, and I love the place. I love South Auckland. Everybody else kind of moved off. Two brothers went off to Australia, actually, and our younger sisters just moved over as well. So there's only two of us left here. I'm in Manurewa, and my other brother, he's moved to Mangere, although he keeps telling me he's in Papatoetoe West, and I'm like, sorry, I can hear the Southwestern Motorway from you.
Definitely Mangere.
Yeah, you're Mangere, and but he's a good sport. So I've I guess
you've been around, man.
Yeah,
you've travelled.
Done a little bit, eh?
That's amazing. Like listening to your story, like I actually knew a lot about Invercargill because that's kind of some of our conversation. But to hear Ponsonby, Invercargill, Manurewa, Otara, and this whole journey and that was probably before you became a teenager.
Yeah.
Wow. Like in terms of, this is all about conversations around, our upbringing, some of that. Like what are some of the standout things that you experienced? Like what were key, in those key areas, what are some of the memories that you had that really stood out for you that you can think of? Like Ponsonby obviously is a different environment to Invercargill.
Yeah. It's like with Ponsonby
and Manurewa.
I should preface this with the fact that my father who raised me, love that man, is my birth father. Yeah. So mum met dad in Invercargill, and my mum's life in Ponsonby was different. It was. I will say it wasn't the Pacific sort of ideal around that era in Greyland and Ponsonby for my mum, which is why she left. But moving to Invercargill and the move to Invercargill was a huge game changer for us because obviously mum met dad.
Yeah.
I got to grow up in a place that was completely unlike anything I guess most Polynesian kids would expect. I can remember the cold. and in Invercargill, it didn't so much snow.
And that's
as
real cold, eh?
Real cold.
Not Auckland cold. That's,
and the
real
rain
snow.
is just like, oh, the rain is trying to kill me. But you know, it was I had a lot of fun down there and adventures. You know, whitebait fritters, my auntie, and family down there. And the thing a lot of people sometimes don't realise is that there was a huge Pacifica community down in Invercargill and Bluff because of the freezing works. So my Uncle Johnny, and his wife Mavis were down there, and he was working at Ocean Beach. We had other family that came down. I had two uncles that were in Invercargill as well. So there was like this whole little island community. And a story my uncle shares with me is sort of like, you know, Mum comes down to Invercargill, and he's like, okay, let's see what happens down here. And then she meets Dad, and my uncle's like, of all the places to find another Samoan. But yeah, you know, Dad was doing a lot of stuff in the sort of the rural agricultural business sort of thing. He worked for Wrightson at one point. And I have a memory of him when he first started seeing Mum. He bought me this huge stuffed dog, and I named it Nina, you know. And it went everywhere with me right up until in my 20s. My brothers remember this dog because it was looking raggedy by the time we're older. But, you know, typical Samoan story. We had an auntie that came over, Auntie Ufiaka came over, and I came home from work one day, and I'm like, where is half our stuff?
They tell me.
Where's the stereo? You know, and it all got loaded up, and you know, then I was like, oh, you know, you're like, oh, when you lose that, you're like, oh, damn. And then I went to the room, and was like, where's Nina?
Nina's gone.
But that was tied into my memories of, you know, the first time, you know, Dad was with Mum, and like we moved up to Hamilton because he got a job in the Waikato working for Wrightson Anime. And those memories for me are sort of like it's a different sort of take on the Pacific story for us, in that a lot of Mum and Dad's family were in Auckland, and there were not a lot of us, you know, once we left Invercargill, we were in Hamilton, you know, and there wasn't a lot of us around. There were a few, and we joined, you know, one of Dad's uncles was a deacon at the Efakasa church that started up. And so that's where we got to see the Samoans, you know, hey. But it wasn't like Auckland, just sort of like you've got Efakasa and Waikato, which is sort of like, hey, we're all good. But up in Auckland, it's like, we are the best. And so we're like, oh, these guys are serious.
Because Auckland was a growing melting pot of all the Polynesian cultures, So obviously outside of that, even as further down as Invercargill to Hamilton, all those different regions were kind of getting the taste of it, but not the full kind of full Auckland experience.
And so, you know, I went, like I shared that story with you when I went to primary school, and, you know, Mum's taking me to Whitiora Primary, walking through the gate, and goes, oh, this is cool, what are we doing here? You know, Mum takes me into the office, and then Mum walks out the office door with me, I'm like, hold up. And then, you know, walking into that classroom, and, you know, this is the thing I say about my memories. I remember being there with the teacher, and the teacher introducing me, and, you know, some kids being like, how do you say the surname? It's like, oh, you know, but all of these faces, and I'm looking in the room to try and find, you know, is there anyone in here? And then in the corner, I saw like, I can't remember their names, but these two boys who became my good friends. One was a Māori kid, and the other was Cook Island. And it was like, I'm going to hang out with him.
Because obviously, visually, there was a connection.
And, you know, just as kids, we could joke and understand each other's jokes and just have some fun. But yeah, Hamilton was definitely a different place. And then moving up to Auckland, because Dad got a job up in Auckland, and we spent a year in Otara. So I went to Sandbox Primary, which is sort of like this overflow primary that they had in Otara. It doesn't exist anymore now. I mean, the buildings are still there, but it's not a school anymore. Oh, wow. But going from, you know, Spot the Brown... to everyone, to like so many, you know, but with my cousins as well, and it was like a real community with these kids. You know, everyone was like not street smart, but they all knew the ways, the codes.
Yeah, that's right.
And I learned, I learned how to make these kites out of newspapers and salukuangio. Used to take, all these kids were like hustling and showing, oh, you don't have toys, also we'll show you how to make some.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it was like, for lollies and stuff, everyone make their own. So we learned how to make toffee by the tray load. And it would be like people would make toffee, then at the end of school, would all go up to the gate and they'd snap it off and just share it with everyone.
Yeah.
And also like this is, how these kids were bonding.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just to think about it.
And I loved my time at Sandbrook. There was so many cool kids that I met there. The teachers were amazing, and we had Yandara around the corner who were kind of like, But I had my other cousins who were on the other side of Otara, on Alexander, Krez, and they were like, we just as kids you had no concept of what what things were. So like, I'm going to go to my cousin's house. So you'd walk over to your cousin's house from a massive
distance. That's the crazy thing, eh? Like you think back then, and we keep on bringing this up, the life was simpler. Like you're going down, if you're going to go down the road, you go down the road.
You go down the road.
And it's like a few Ks down the road.
Yeah.
And so did you do that every day? Like, was that every day thing or selected days in the week where you knew that mum wouldn't find out?
Actually, it was one of those things where like your parents like, you do your hours, get all your chores done.
Yes.
And then you can go play or whatever.
That's right.
They didn't realize our idea of play was like, oh, we're going to walk from Manurewa to Otara, hang out with our cousins and then try and figure out how we're going to get back home because we're probably going to be stuffed.
Yeah.
And just like as kids, I don't know if it was the same for you where you were, but like how you say, we did all the games on the street as well. Yes. There's always one kid at the top of the road who'd scream out car.
Yeah, that's right.
Pick up the wickets and walk off and, let the car go through or stop the game of, or try and just, sidestep a...
Depending if the person in the car was your dad or your mum or your uncle.
But we also, like, all the kids knew where the fruit trees were.
Yeah.
So
very true, yeah.
When you were like, oh, we're going to go this way, we'll go this way because the feijoas are in season, or we know where the plums are, or we'll bring along, someone bring some sugar because we can find a tap, we know where the lemon trees are, all that sort of, just having fun. And I don't know if if it's something that still happens or parents nowadays, and I understand why.
Yeah.
But back in our day, our parents sort of like, you're the oldest, you're in charge, make sure nothing happens, or you get it.
You're
like,
right.
Okay.
And you do everything to protect all the siblings, make sure they get home.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are moments where back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you just early 90s, you just felt more comfortable, just relaxed. I guess there was you knew that there was a responsibility, but also at the same time there was that whole thing of you just did it. It was, you went to school, but then you look back now, like today, I can't believe that you would let your child walk that long, and it's like, but it was life. It was like, that's what we knew.
It's like you tell your parents, oh, Mum, we're going to go off to the school and just play on the playground. Playgrounds back then were like, I guess parents look at them now and go, death traps.
Yeah, that's
look
right.
At this multi-story thing. There's no safety net. You've got the fireman's pole, which is like 2 stories high, and we're like jumping off to catch it and swing down.
Yeah.
And so you're like, well, we're going to go play on there. Next minute, we're on the roof of the school running around, trying to find tennis balls and whatever's been thrown up on the roof.
That's so true.
Yeah.
But it's when you look back at that and you just think, man, life was simpler. You didn't have to complicate things. Now today with the technology and all that stuff, it just I guess for a generation now, it's all they know.
Yeah.
But for us, a tennis ball, climbing on the roof, trying to jump from the roof without breaking your leg, and taking in the next door neighbours, feijoas, or anything else that you could find that was available. That was life for us. And I think part of the journey that we're on with this podcast is really rediscovering some of the simpler things in life, but also, just actually being able to pivot and actually say, man, there's some things that we can actually keep simple.
Yeah.
Don't have to overcomplicate life in itself. So, but I really want to get into some of, in terms of who you are, in terms of, I know that we heard a little bit about your backstory, but there's another interesting fact is that you're Samoan, married to a lovely Greek woman. Like, how did that happen? How did that happen? Because obviously that was in the early days when kind of that kind of relationship wasn't really seen, you know?
I wouldn't know if it wasn't really seen, but it was more unique and you know.
To tell us.
So after my first...
Shout out to Maria.
Yeah, shout Maria. Love you. Sorry about this. No, just kidding. It was like... So I did I followed the pathway of most Samoans with growing up with Samoan parents, and I wanted to go off to uni, I wanted to go to Polytech and study graphic design because, you know, art was sort of my thing.
Yeah.
Everyone knew me as, you know, the guy that drew comic books and all sorts of stuff. So I went off on that journey, and then Dad was like, yeah, that journey's over. You need to go university and study something proper.
Yeah.
You need doctor, lawyer, teacher, one of those sorts of professions.
Because in their mind, that's those are the jobs.
Yeah, that's where you will find your ability to, you know, serve and help the rest of your family. Me being me and me being young, I was like, 2 years later, yeah, my results are really bad in the exams. That maybe this dream's
that's over.
We'll try something else. And Dad was like, well, then you need to get a job, but you're not working because our father, once we turned 15, I think it was, you know, holidays were over for us. So he would like say, okay, everyone in the car, we're driving around factories. Yeah. You're gonna go in and ask them if there are any vacant positions going in the factory. And that was us, you know. So I worked in quite a few factories, and my brothers did as well. Amazing places, met some really amazing people, taught us to, you know, have respect for people in these positions because, you know, we only worked there for a season. Yeah. And for me, I was like, man, I can't do this for the rest of my life. But there were people that were doing this this is where it was
their
for
life. Yeah.
And they were like family, and they looked after me. And, you know, my brothers had the same sort of stories about, you know, that life. So Dad was like, you're not doing that. You need to find a proper job. So I was... ended up working for Postbank. I got a job with Postbank as a part-time teller. Yeah. And that's sort of like, that was where the journey with Maria starts because started working in banking, ended up working in a back office job doing credit cards for the ANZ. So I was like a customer services rep. And Maria was working in the same building. So we were up on Upper Queen Street. We used to have a building there. And the first time I saw Maria, I was just like, what the... Because her and I are like oil and water.
Yes, yeah.
She's into rock and, you know, she was into heavy metal and all that sort of stuff. And she remembers seeing me with my Kangol cap turned to the back, you know, starter jacket.
Yeah, I've seen the photos, Maria. I've seen the photos.
Well, I had my, you know, what were the jeans again? My Origin jeans.
Origin.
Yeah, bump toe dog mans. And I was like leaving work and I'm looking at her going, Manta. Walked on. And like she's looking at me, she's like, look at that homeboy. You know, it was that sort of, that was, but we developed a friendship over the years, you know, and she became just sort of this person I could really talk to. Eventually, you know, I was in a relationship and that relationship ended. You know, just, you know, as you are when you're young, it's like my brother's like, hey, we should like, you know.
Yeah. Go and explore.
Let's check out this club, you know. And so we did. And like Maria became sort of this person who every now and then was like, I'm stuck in town. Yeah. What you up to?
Baseball.
Baseball, yes. I took her to baseball once and she was just like, what?
As long as you didn't know the Sunset Palms. Huh?
Yeah. I don't think I ever got down that far enough down that drive. I was like, too many gold teeth. I'm leaving.
That would be
maybe take the Manu Samoa. We just hung out more and got to know each other, and she became my best friend, and then it just grew from there. And we've been together 24 years, married 21 this year. She's that person, you know. She knows. She's like, other than my family, she's that person that knows when, you know, I come in and she's like, yeah, something's bugging this one. Yeah, and she'll help me through these spaces, and that she always understands how to read me, and the same for her. And like, you know, she's just an amazing, incredible person. Yeah. You know, I think you mentioned, you know, who are your heroes. She's definitely, you know, my superhero.
Yeah.
And she's helped me.
He's a very incredible human being.
See things that I didn't realize. The support to be an artist and do what I do would not be possible without
I think
her.
that's a bonus for you.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, because obviously I've known Maria for 21 years as well. So you guys are totally different, but yet the support she gives you in times when you've got work or you don't have work. But then I love the fact that it's not an anchor for her. It's more she continues to blow wind in your sails. We can do this. Let's do this. But I love the fact that even though you're different, that you guys can actually do that and support each other. So it's not new to me, but obviously to our listeners and those who are listening, it's having that someone to support you and blow wind in your sails. And
totally.
You see it so much in Maria, for you.
And I mentioned to you before, it's like as I've gotten older, and I have an amazing network of family and friends, and they've been vital for me to be able to go to the places I've gone, but also as you get older, you start realizing who's still there with you.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that it also reminds you of who's not there with you. And that's not to say, I'm not saying, who's not there because of whatever. I'm just saying that those who aren't there, and you remember them as well, and you honor their memory in relation to where you're at. And it's like, I'm a firm believer in this idea of past, present, future as being the three things that are vital on your journey. It's knowing where you're from, where you're at, and where you're going.
That's good.
And what you're connected to within those spaces. The Samoan idea of va. That relational space.
Can you open that up a little bit more? Because obviously, so some listeners who may be listening, they won't understand the concept of va. The va between people and that sacred space. From your perspective, what does that look like for you?
It's two little letters making one little word that holds so much in relation to culturally and I guess metaphysically, what it is to be not just Samoan but of the moana of this region. And so I was introduced to the concept of va when I was doing my research for my master's. I was already aware of it, but it was Albert Wendt that kind of helped formulate it with his essay on
Legend.
Tattooing the post-colonial body and that's sort of been a foundational document for a lot of us who are exploring that space, and a lot of it comes about through when you're looking at identity and trying to figure out who you are and where you're at. And for me, that journey with the va, that relational space, was understanding that the va, as it is for me, is it's about what connects us, like you to me, to the others here, but also it is what connects me to the place I'm in, where I've been. We've talked about my life in Invercargill, and that's all part of. I always look at it like the va that existed there when I was living that in the past still exists now for me, and it's still it's still growing. When I'm gone, it will still continue to encompass all of those around me. That's just my sort of take on it. But the counter to that is like, this is a discussion that happens a lot in the diaspora. Those of us that are born outside of Samoa, or like, what is the va? Tell us. You ask someone from Samoa and they look at you like, because to them it just is.
That's right. It's not something they've learned, it's something they know. And so we are learning that. And so it's really, man, it's such some gold, man, it's so good.
It's one of those things where, I have these talks a lot with other artists and, my siblings, and especially my younger sister Tia, because her and I were sort of like in the same space developing alongside each other. And a lot of what we do as artists, me being the visual artist, her being the dancer, we take concepts that are Samoan like talanoa and the va, and we look at what they mean to us here. But before we even go to that space, we need to ask and talk about it with our elders and look into it to respect the fact that it's its own thing. But in developing what we do in our practices here, it exists here. But I can't take that to Samoa and say, this is the new va, because, I'll be ducking jandals as I run to the plane.
You're running back to the plane. You won't even make the plane, you might be swimming back. But that's the whole thing of that whole experience. You talked about past, present, future. To live within your current I guess, sphere and work out of that space of being a creative,
Yeah.
you always got to acknowledge where that came from,
Yeah.
and also acknowledge the past.
It's about whālualo, having deference and respect for what has been, and in a lot of cases what exists. And so in my path, my journey to being an artist, it's realizing that it's not about me at all.
Yeah.
It's about honouring my parents and their generation, but in doing that, it should honour their parents and their parents' parents, and holding that at the forefront of what I'm doing and understanding. And it's why when we talk about being in Palangi spaces, when we talk about being in the art world, not being afraid to hold that ground and say that's your interpretation, but that's not the truth of the work. The work has this, it has its ngafa, its whakapapa, and it's connected to my family, and you can't skew it another way because this is what it is. You're free to take that, but that's not the truth of the work. And it's different in relation to I guess the general view, and I'm like really being I'm generalizing here, but I remember talking to my Uncle Johnny about, because he's my mentor, he's my other superhero.
Oh, shout out to Uncle Johnny, because Johnny's the legend. He's absolutely the legend.
Just an amazing artist, like I said, down in Invercargill doing his thing, but still painting. And then like progressing and developing his work. And my cousin, his son Lyle, his arts practice, and through him and all the people that I've got to know through them, kind of getting a better, wider view on where we sit as Pacifica, in our arts practices. And I had this, I call it my fia poko moment. I want to,
all of us have got those moments.
Decided, had the discussion with Maria after working for years, doing, working in banking and then moving on and doing, other, work leasing and some other stuff. And then having the, talk to Maria, I was like, I think I'm going to throw this all in and be an artist. The person that blows wind in your sail. I think she almost took out her knife. No, just kidding.
Get down the sails.
No, she was amazing. But and going and engaging in that journey, I was kind of trying to find my way as an artist, trying to figure out what I was doing with this camera, because the camera became a faster way for me to communicate as opposed to what I was doing with sketching and illustrating. And it also became a great way for me to actually earn another income while I was trying to understand what I was doing. But I was trying to divide or split the idea of what was my commercial practice, so what was my fine arts practice. And I hadn't quite worked it out. And I went back to Invercargill after our mum passed away. And it was the first time in decades that I'd been back down, and I got to catch up with Uncle Johnny, spent some time with him in Mavis, and it was amazing. And it was one of those things where I needed to be out of where I was, sit in another space, reconnect to my past, seeing Invercargill again after so long, going down to Bluff, and then having the time to sit with Uncle after I bought him his koko Samoa because he needed supplies. Invercargill's a tough place. You got to bring the supplies. Got to look after our elders. And we were just having our, one of our mini talanoa, and I thought I'd ask him, Uncle, what is art to you? What does it mean? How do you, and he just kind of looked at me and then laughed for 5 minutes. And it was like, his reply was, who cares? It's, if you're worried about what is art, or you're worried about what other people think art should be, or where you're going with your art, when are you going to make your art? When are you going to make something that means something to you? If you're worried about the input of others. And
that's someone that's had a legacy of art behind them, and it's not talking from a snapshot. It's actually from experiencing a life of art. So, but
also the approach to getting that answer wasn't like I got to Invercargill, sat down with him and asked him the question. It was the sit with Uncle for days, working with him and just spending time with him, and then having that conversation, and then. He would tell us a lot of, fill in a lot of stuff around their lives, mum and dad, mum's life, dad's life, back then, but then also filling in my life in relation to the art side of things. And I had this, we had another conversation the next time I went down, and it was around where does art sit in the Samoan context? What is art as far as Samoa works? And he was like, it's not like the way we see it, where you have the world, and then you have the art world. And in the art world, you take art and you put it on the wall, you put it on a plinth. People talk about it, then you sell it.
Yeah.
He was like, within our world, the art is entwined in the way we are and who we are. There is no separation of art and Samoa.
Yes.
They're one and the same.
Yeah.
So we have this way of categorizing art as being this visual art or performative art or whatever. Within Samoa, it is what it is. The art is in us, the way we weave, the way we walk.
Yeah.
It's our orators. It's the way we just carry ourselves. It's our songs. It's remembering.
It's in our being.
It's in our being. When we see our carvers, when we see things made, when you watch the Aomanga put down the umu, that's an art form in itself. And like, if you break away from this idea of, this Western concept of art, then you realize that, to Samoans, it's like, everything we do is a work of art in the way that we carry our, and it was just like, oh.
Do I get paid for that?
It's like, okay. But
it was never about that, eh? It was never about the price on it.
No.
Because the value was already found in it.
And it's like, similarly that, again, these are just my thoughts. It's like, it's not a singular thing. It's not an ego-driven thing. It's part of the community. It's part of your tautua. It's part of your how you put back in. The individual is important, but the community is where your heart sits. It's where if you break it down to its most simple, your family is probably one of the most important units you'll ever be part of.
Yes.
Samoa embraces that, and it makes it bigger in that it's not just your family, it's every other family you're connected to. Plus, then you've got your all the place you're from, and
that's right.
All of these sorts of concepts. I didn't really pay any attention to when I was younger. I was that everything I saw when I was younger. Up until I could really start earning my money, and I was just like, you know what, I don't need to be Samoan. It's like, all I see is debt, pain, and I don't get it. I don't want to do this. I don't want to struggle forever. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized, I hadn't fully seen what was going on, and
because there was a personal journey for you, eh?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned before around identity, as a young boy, and then growing into this whole thing of maturing in this whole fact of finding yourself in the midst of, even on your creative journey, that's helped you. Like, tell us a little bit of how that journey is, like in terms of, because obviously we're capturing some of that now, but how was that journey? Because you mentioned around, Samoa, the Samoan culture or Wha Samoa wasn't really. It was disconnect, or
it was mum and dad chose to raise us and focus more on the Palangi world because they felt that's where we would be best served. The counterpoint to that was it didn't cut us off. We still had, Samoan was still spoken around the house, but we didn't speak it as much, but we understood.
Yes.
I can, my spoken Samoan is not strong, but I can understand. It's getting rustier because I'm spending less time around. This is the irony of it all, but I'm trying to get back into it, especially, with the way our families are so spread out. But it was that part of growing up, was always struggle. That's all I ever saw as a kid. Things were always put ahead of us, and sort of like, in the, the line of what gets sorted first. It was always, the church and other things that got sort of kind of like, it felt like we were an afterthought later on. But what I realized later on was that, my parents, they were firm in their service to church and family, and we never saw the sort of full scope of what they were doing. And not just them, but all of our families. They were just working.
Know, eh?
No, you never know. And like, I always talk about the fact, mum and dad would, both take off the, the collar and tie, the nurse's uniform, and put on the overalls and then go and clean. And we would be the kids who just like, adventure time. I'm walking around this office and, look at the kid, Milo.
You didn't think anything of it. You just thought that was life.
We just thought, but it was for another purpose. And I talk about this in my own artwork. It's sort of like, I've created works around the fact, coming to understand, for example, my dad.
Yeah.
Very strict man, but very firm in his belief that he wanted us to know, to embrace knowledge, and to realize the power of knowledge. I think he'd even said to us, the days of being able to hold through power, through strength, is fading. Power lies in the mind, and how you utilize the knowledge that you've gained. As a kid, I'm like, what is this guy?
Is this lecture gonna what does this mean?
Anyway, about the milk.
But then you look back now, as a mature
and I understand
man. You understand.
I understand, but I also understand that, the choices that they made for us were choices they felt would best suit us, or would be best for us as we got older. And, we talked about the fact that, our parents didn't talk a lot about what was going on because, for them, we didn't need to know that. That was their burden to carry, or their tautua, And when I got older and, I saw my aunties and uncles, and I learned more about what was, what they were doing in relation to building up and trying to secure a foundation for all of us.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm an idiot, and
I think all of us, to be honest, we look back and we think, man, some of that gold that was shared by our parents, and a lot of it was through broken English, a lack of understanding of the current society that we were growing up in, but they didn't care.
No, I have this.
They just shared it.
I have this memory of my dad sending me up in Hamilton to go to the shop to buy a can of pears, but because of Dad's accent, I heard beer. So I went up to the shop and I got, I went, must have been 3 or 4 times coming back to tell me, they don't sell beer, Dad. He's like, pear, a can of beer.
What about?
So eventually he ended up going up, came back and I was like, oh.
Oh, I thought you meant the other thing you meant.
But, it's like, even with all of, these misunderstandings, his goal for his children was for us to be the next generation through to, again, lift the families. And I made the error of not seeing the goal, but only seeing what was in the way.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of my 20s and 30s, I was like, nah, I don't need this. I'm just going to go off and hang out and get into
It's not just your story. Also. There's a lot of people that did that.
And then, the first sort of realization that, was Dad passing away. He passed away young. Yeah. We lost our father when he was 47. But he'd set such a good foundation, even though we hadn't realized it up to that point, that it's held us, in good stead. It's something, I'm forever grateful for, and I will always talk to I don't have children, Marin, I don't have children, but we've got our nieces and nephews, and I'll always talk to them about their grandfather, because they never got to know him. They don't understand who he is, but we're all representations of him.
That's so true.
So letting them know through us, the sort of the first sort of keystone in our family on this land was, this amazing man. And then when he passed away, the Whasā Moa kicked in for the funeral, for the oki. And I was really apprehensive because I'm still in that mindset of, this is just going to be a nightmare. Yeah. And because of Dad's family and everything that he was connected to, there were so many people that came from, the US, from Samoa, from Hawaii, from Australia. And I was just in this whirlwind of, I don't know what I'm doing. I wasn't, this is
but you're also dealing with grief as well.
Yeah. But the thing was, it was my uncles that stepped in and my aunties, and they were like, you just do this here, leave the rest of it to us, and we'll make sure that it works. And I'm thinking, there's so much money that's going to be needed for this. There's all of this other stuff that's coming. There's the protocols that come in when the CEs come through, and I don't know any of it.
Yeah.
But they lifted me. And it was one of the first real moments I understood what Whasā Moa was in relation to that. Yeah,
that moment there.
Yeah, and it was I just was like, I didn't realize. Yeah. And then afterwards, when we, after we settled everything, there was no cost to us.
Yeah.
It was so well put together, and there was no, all of the families looked after us.
So good. It's so good.
When it was like done, what I understood was the way it should be done.
Yes.
The respect and alofa that came through was just, amazing. And then later on, when we lost Mum, it was slightly different in that Mum chose to not have the Samoa side of things, and our family was amazing.
Yeah.
Mum's siblings were like, what did your mum want? And then they gossied us through because, we're, like you said, we're trying to deal with the grief of losing our mother.
Yeah.
And again, it was that sense of alofa that was key in relation to us understanding what it is to be Samoans.
Yeah.
And I think these are all moments that then kind of played into what I became, or what I've sort of like looked at as an artist.
Yeah.
And understanding I have this amazing heritage to call on. I've had this discussion with a few of my friends because, hip hop was one of those things I grew into.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, boy, and all of that side of things. And I love hip hop music, and I love, so many aspects of it. I'm part of TMD.
Yeah.
And those artists have been, hugely fundamental in my development. But as far as hip hop went, it got to a point where I realized, actually, this culture belongs to another people. I love it, but I have this amazing culture that's been sitting in the background waiting for me to see it.
Well.
When I got my
But there was a moment for you, when you realized it.
Yeah.
That is a culture that belongs to another group of people. But this is where you stand, and you need to learn about that rich culture that you came from.
I think like it's for Samoa, being Samoan has always sort of like tapped me on the shoulder and like, don't forget who you are. And I'm like, But it was like one of the first real memories for me of getting that sort of. I went and got my kaulima done in Otara. At Suluape's spot when he used to do the work out of his garage, and I went along with my brother and our cousin, because they were getting their second kaulimas done. And I think it was about 23, 24. I was like, let's jump on the bus. We'll head off to water. We're getting older. Legs don't, I don't want to walk that far.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, not as adventurous as we were when we were kids. But, we got there and they were getting guard. But it wasn't Suluape, the senior. So it was one of the nephews did it. And I remember watching my cousin and my brother get it done. And then they looked at me, hey, you should do it too. And I'm like, yeah, should I? And it was like, because back then it was 25, I think it was $25 or $30 to get your kaulima done. Yeah, unheard of nowadays.
Unheard of now, man.
And like, I remember lying there and, the thing was like, okay, asking me the question, so why are you getting this done? And I'm like, why am I getting this done?
But that's a good question.
Because I'm like, peer pressure. Say peer pressure? No. Come on with something smart. And I was like, to prove I'm Samoan. And he had this, he's like, you don't own a mirror.
Wow.
I'm like,
wow, that's a good comeback. That's a good comeback, man.
But that was sort of the,
But that was the journey that you were on, though.
But at the time when he said it, I was just took it, I was like, but now I'm as I got, I was like, yeah, actually, I don't, I've never seen myself as Samoan, and then I was like, but everybody else sees the Samoan, not me.
Yeah.
And so that sort of played a lot into my development and going back to study, do my postgrad and my master's. When I first started that, I was like, camera, Samoan with the camera, take photos, yeah. We'll see what happens from here. But it was an understanding what it was for me on that journey as a Samoan, and it became, so the camera originally was sort of like, this is the thing that will be the artwork. This is what creates the artwork. But then when I finished my master's, I'd come to the realization that it's not about the visual aspect of the work, it's about the oratory, which is key to who we are.
Yeah.
It's part of who we are.
Storytelling.
Yeah, the storytelling. The camera is not the be-all and end-all, it's just part of the process.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work I created, the camera became that way of me creating the images that spoke into a lot of the journeys I had and a lot of memories that I pulled up that became that foundational artwork that sort of sits in where I'm at now in making. Yeah.
But the incredible journey that you've been on as a photographer, because would you see yourself as an just overall artist? Not just a photographer.
See, that's the thing. It's like, are you an artist? Are you a photographer? Are you a visual artist?
But what's your take on it? Like, what's your take? Because obviously everyone would have their viewpoint on what that would mean for them, because you express yourself using some of these tools, but I guess you see yourself more as an artist.
I guess, if I wanted to be pretentious, I could say that, I am a master.
I am master.
I think a term I've become really comfortable with is visual orator. Yeah.
Wow.
And,
I've never heard that.
Well, there are so many lessons that I've learned along the way around, the ability for our people to communicate through story. And when you listen to Tula Fale,
Yes.
when they're having their, whātau, when they're doing their, and like half the time I'm like, I have no idea what they're saying. There's so much prose and thing going on.
Yeah.
I'm just going,
It's for those who are listening or non-Samoan, it's orators, the Samoan orators.
Samoan orators. It's just incredible.
Powerful stuff.
I remember going to one of my jobs as the photographer was I photograph events, and anonymous Matt had the Luminati
Nice.
program going on at Mangere Arts Centre a few years ago. And he's like, they said, can you come in and document it for us? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sweet. And then when, in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to a job and take photos. And then when I got there, the penny dropped. I'm like, hold on a minute. This is a work that looks at oratory, tula fale, orators, makai. And then he's taken the hip-hop world as well, and he's included it. But it's that sort of
Interwoven.
journey. Interwoven. But then I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, there are makai here, and I've just turned up in shorts. Okay, I'm going to go over to Mangere Arts Centre to get myself a near lava. It was one of those things that, like, it started, things started coming into play.
Click.
Yeah, but the thing, like, that's not the lesson. The lesson was when I sat down and the performances came through, there was one performance that came up and it stuck with me, for years. And it was a battle. It was an MC battle, but it was a battle MC versus Tula Fale.
I saw that. That was powerful.
And when I sat in the audience and I was taking photos of this, like, man, pretty cool. And then they started, and the battle MC, my younger brother's an MC, and I've hip hop. I've listened to battle MCs, and he did an amazing job of just sort of articulating the journey of those of us in the diaspora and the struggles we have to try and meet the expectations of Samoa and Samoans, and how hard it is to work, pay bills, and then send this money, or cover whālawa and all the rest of it, paying off these huge debts that come through for us. And it was like, man, that's on point. That's on point. I really
honestly, when I saw that, because I remember seeing it, and I think Matt shared it on quite a lot of his channels on social media, and that,
and it was like
powerful. Man, just stood out.
And then the Tula Fale got to speak, and it was a young orator. But he had, I think it was 2 or 3 other older orators sitting next to him, just off to the side. And we had Field Style sitting there in the middle, sort of like playing the adjudicator. Amazing guy.
But it's the way it was framed.
It was just the way, And then so you see the Tula Fale stand there, and he listens. And like, it was funny because you had, when the battle MC finished, the Tula Fale acknowledged him and thanked him, and went through the protocol of, just being respectful and mindful of what had just been expressed. And I was like, what's he going to do? And he just took this deep breath and then just started. And it was just like he started outlining the history and all of the things and aspects around, what it is to be part of, Samoan, what it is for Samoa, and it just kept going and going. And then as he was saying a lot of this, his cadence started to pick up, and like all the points he was making, I was just like, damn. And then it got to the point where he was speaking so fast, it sounded like a machine gun.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh, damn. And then, the MC just kind of like dipped his head. And it was just like, for me, it was that example of, okay, maybe I don't know enough to really comment on things, but I just learned something. And in my mind, it was like you had this battle MC drawing on hip-hop culture, which is at the most 60 years old. He was able to pull on that, but then the relevance in relation to where we are here in Aotearoa and pull on all of that history. And then you had this Tula Fale, this orator, paying respect to this young man, both of them quite young. Then he took in this deep breath, and to me it was like him just inhaling 3,000 years of history and preparing it to reply. And I'm like, okay.
It was like, it's a wow kind of moment.
It was just like okay, oh damn. I just learned some stuff here.
So good. And there's powerful moments, and I think like moments like that help us to actually not wake up, but kind of be aware, how powerful our culture is and where we come from, but also the learnings that we've actually gained along the way. It's helped us become who we are. But I want to touch on, because obviously we want to make sure we maximize our time with you, right? But I want to touch on the stuff you're doing now, because you're actually mentoring a lot of people. Now tell us a little bit about that, because obviously we've heard about your past. We're looking at kind of the artwork and the art world that you're in. But now you have the ability now, and you've had the privilege of actually to pass that on, pass the knowledge on, pass the learnings on. Now tell us a little bit about that background of how you got to that place, and I guess some of the goal that around some of the youngsters, or not even youngsters, a lot of them are just developing their art form. But how did that come about? Like, how did you get into that space of mentoring?
It kind of plays part and parcel of what it is to being the older sibling. You're growing up, you're always told you're the oldest, you're the one that's being responsible. You need to show the others the way. Yeah. You need to make sure that they're safe. And that was always drummed into me growing up. A lot of the times I resented that idea of, I can't just be free like my younger brothers and do what I want to do, because they're always looking at me going, set an example. But in a lot of ways, that idea has sort of played into what I do now. As a photographer, and I've been a photographer for close to 20 years now. Yeah. So I've been able to see and do a lot of different things. I've worked in different fields, from editorial to doing event photography to weddings, fine art.
So the spectrum of that is...
So that's given me a solid base to draw on, and a foundation to be able to pass on experiences. So, started off small. I did a few workshops and working in Nathan Homestead with a few others, with the original Manamoana project in South Auckland. And, working with Emily and Elizabeth was incredible, learning off of them. Yeah. But then understanding that, there are people who are in the position I was not 20 years ago, but 40 years ago, still trying to figure out where they're at. Yeah. And how can I support or care for them and make sure that they get a good start? Yeah. That I'm able to put wind in their sails. Yeah. And it sort of like just grew from that, from doing those workshops to then being invited to teach photography in other areas. Like last year and part of this year, I've been teaching photography to primary and intermediate aged kids. Yeah. So that they can talk around what climate change looks like to them, not from a scientific point of view, having that scientific input, but just getting their idea of what do they see.
What do they understand about it?
And, we did that with the Auckland Arts Festival years ago with I Spy, and I did that with Emily Mafaleo. And, you give the tools to the children or these young photographers, and you support them, and they bring back gold. Yeah. And that was, for me, I was like, this is the sort of thing we need to see more of, to hear more from. And it's just sort of like gone, built up from there. And just this year I did the CNZ program, working with this amazing photojournalist from the US, Christopher Morris, and the things he's seen in the world, was just like amazing and terrifying. Yeah. But having him sort of be the masterclass mentor for our Pacifica photographers, and acknowledging the fact that our voices are relevant, and that we need to be in that space to talk around stories that relate to us. We've just had, I think, is it 35 years for Tangata Pacifica?
Yeah, that's right. Yesterday. That's right.
And what they've been doing for decades, and where do we go from here? Where do we build on that? And this is why it's important for those of us who have the ability to pass on our knowledge. We should be in that space. Yeah. It's part of our culture. You have these elders. When you're sitting with your grandparents and your grandmother's doing the weaving, you sit there and watch and learn.
That's right. Yeah.
When you're out in the Maunga with your uncle and he's showing you what And,
that's right.
And I've pulled up half of it. He's like, get out.
And you realise what hard work is in the plantation.
Oh, totally. And it's applying some of these methodologies that relate to our cultural practices to what we do now in this space that's been really important. But also along that line of learning is it broadens my view on the importance of acknowledging that on this land we are here, but this is not our land. It belongs. It's land that our cousins.
Yeah, that's right.
It's their heart and soul, and where does that fit in relation to what we do now?
Yeah.
You know, when we're passing on knowledge and when we're just being with them. And in my mind, it comes down to that idea of when you go visit your auntie.
Yeah.
You know, you acknowledge and you go into the kitchen and you help out.
That's right.
And you wait to, you just make sure things are done and sorted. You don't walk into the
You
lounge.
sit down on the lounge.
Sit down. Wait, where's my food?
Ready to be served. You go and serve.
Yeah, you go and serve. It's like, you walk into the lounge, sit down next to you, and go, hey, what's going on? Where's my food?
What was
It's
the last time?
He's got,
So we welcome back into the house.
he's got, why is he limping?
But that's the thing. It's part of who we are, and like we just illustrated there, it's like we're not there to be served. We're there to serve.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that over the last few years now, you've given out a lot of free advice, just in the whispers, in their people's ears about, hey, maybe this angle. But also, just love the work you're doing. Was it with AUT? You were
Still doing it.
Still doing a lecturing there, but also the work you're doing with focusing on helping, and I think we spoke a little bit about it, but what we spoke about around helping people find their space in this world in terms of what they see with their lens.
Yeah.
They're finding that how do you kind of help that people discover that? I guess they've got to discover it for themselves, but
yeah, it's a lot of like what I've learned is that there's an innate ability for people to be able to create or if they have an interest in something that generally is driven by this innate desire to want to do something. So it's then sort of my role to help bring that out with them, but it's not for me to go, you need to do this, you need to do that. Right. It's like, show me what you're trying to say, and I'll tell you a way that you can approach it. You can either take that or you discard it.
Yes.
Just learn from what you're trying. Again, it comes down to what my dad was saying. All knowledge is good knowledge. Even knowledge bought through pain is knowledge that will serve you.
Wow.
And I've learned that many times.
Yeah.
But I think, teaching at AUT and teaching with other, I guess, students has shown me that there are different ways of seeing things. I brought up this, when it comes to documenting our people, I'm comfortable in that space because I know our people, and most of our people acknowledge, that, it's Raymond with the camera, it's all good.
Yeah.
But if I was asked to move to another space and say I was asked to create a story around our Indo-Fijian family, I would probably say I'm not going to go into that space and document them. But what I could do is give me the name of someone in that space who is keen to document or who wants to go through the process of telling that story, and I will support that person. I will show them, the technology and how to use it, but everything else comes from them, and you'll find a richer story is built up from that.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Not just for the project, but also for the person.
For the person, and it also empowers them to then say, well, you've learned all of these things, fly with that, go with it and start doing your own thing. It's planting those because with photography you've got the ability to build not just your own arts practice but a commercial practice if you want.
Right.
So if we can start giving these other skills to people within our communities or other communities, then we only gain. It's only something positive. And largely I find the art world can be fraught for our people because it's a completely different way of doing things. I touched on my discussions with Johnny around what that means, and we're always having these talks about, well, what do we want? How do we start building something that's more relevant for us? And I say, we need to have these discussions first to start creating this whale that supports us.
Yeah, that's so good.
And it's being open to the good and the bad around how it works and how it doesn't work.
But I just love the way you think around. And it's definitely the whole thing around creating that space, that safe environment where you can talanoa or discuss or actually get to a place where you're rewriting some of that storyline. And you got to do that because obviously your perspective is different from another artist's perspective,
Yep.
but yet collectively in the same room talking about a subject, you can actually be unified in some areas. Well, because all you're trying to do is actually make sure that you're passing on the best knowledge you do have
Yep.
to the next generation or the next lot of creative that come through, and it's powerful, man.
It's also like an understanding that everyone's journey is different.
Yeah.
You know, everything I've talked about, that's where Raymond's come from.
Yes.
My brothers have different journeys,
Yeah.
but you know, they may not see things the way I see them, but we still love each other and acknowledge where we're at, and it's the same with our sister Tia.
Yeah.
You know, we have different opinions and views, but it's having that ability to respect and acknowledge those differences,
Yeah.
and not use it as a way to divide us from each other.
Yeah, and it's foundational to our culture.
Oh, totally. And you know, I've learned. You know, my brothers have taught me lessons. And you know, when I thought, I should do it this way, and they're like, no, try it this way, because you know, you've got one lens, so to speak, on this. this is, and I'm like, you know, and you know, behind all of that is gold for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, how we move forward. It's being able to have these open and frank discussions like we're doing now.
Yeah.
You know, I've used my artwork to have discussions around so many different topics.
Yeah.
Some of them are really, I guess you could call them upsetting in a lot of ways, but I've had the discussion beforehand with family around it, and as long as they understand and they support me in that, then I'm fine with it.
That's
you know,
right.
To open up that conversation. One of, you know, I've been working a lot recently with skull motifs.
Yeah, that's right. There's new. Is that part of a new exhibition you're doing, or is it just a journey of?
It's a journey at the moment. I'm creating a lot of different things around these skull motifs, and it's sort of like, in a way, for me, it's to take away the idea of bones representing, you know, this. It's horror. It's, you know, it's spooky. It's scary. For me, at its most core, bones represent ancestry.
Yeah.
The idea of using these skulls as a way to acknowledge those that have come before me,
Yeah.
and have set the sort of like the pace, as it were.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking, you know, just the last 50 years. It's the last 1,000, 2,000
Yeah.
years.
Generations past.
It's understanding that we have a rich and diverse and beautiful history.
Yeah.
But sometimes we forget about it because we're looking at screens and seeing what we want now.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, it's easier just to dial it back a bit and to simplify
Yeah.
the world and see it from a different perspective. And we've had like a lot of time to reflect the last 2 years. You know, that's been tough.
Yeah.
And I'd say that over that time, having my amazing wife
Yeah.
to support me, my amazing siblings, friends,
Yeah.
to be able to keep in touch with, really meant a lot. That second lockdown was tough.
Yeah.
You know, the first one that came through was like, oh, cool. We'll just, you know, this is amazing. And then that second one, I don't know what it was, but it was harder.
Yeah.
And I know that by the time it finished, I was shattered.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried different ways of coping, but in the end, it was just spending time away from things and realizing, you know, having Maria there and just sitting sometimes,
That's
not
good.
trying to make myself busy so that I could cope.
But that in itself is beautiful. Just
Yeah.
sitting,
Oh yeah,
just taking in, which is
watching my lawn grow big.
just watching it until Maria goes, Ray, go mow the lawn.
Look at that! I can't. Where'd the dog go?
But it's so good that I just hearing you, like even in the busyness of your creative mind and the busyness of the projects you're wanting to prepare for, that you can have that space where you can just sit. And obviously for those creatives listening to this and watching this, sometimes you got to find that safe space for yourself, just for around, because we're obviously just running out of time, but man, it's been such a good talanoa today.
Yeah.
But now for us, for anyone that's listening to this, that we've heard already, just to stop and pause and keep in that moment.
Yep.
What is some advice you would give to the creatives that maybe have had a show stopped or exhibition cancelled, or anything that they've actually gone through where they've hit doors close on them, and you'll probably experience a lot of that through your vast history. But what's some advice? Now, I'm sure you...
Vast history.
Now, your vast history of a long time.
I would say, like I said, just stopping and doing nothing, but also, the reverse is making and doodling. And, for me, it was I still had ideas ticking over, and I'd just make notes, and then that would be something that I could move into later. Some of the projects I'm working on now came from thoughts I had towards the end of that. That at the time, it probably wasn't a good idea to start making, because I was, I looked at some of the work that I some of the shots, some of the real simple ones I shot. That I thought, this is easy. I'll just give this profile photo. I look back at the profile photo. I'm like, I look wrecked.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it when I shot it, but I looked at the photo. I'm like, there's something definitely not right in what I'm seeing in this.
Yeah.
But that, again, like I said, even lessons learned from pain provide knowledge that you can build on.
Yeah.
I would say don't stop making. The shows in that might stop, but that doesn't mean you have to stop.
That's good. Good advice.
Just kind of keep going. Always look to learn. I kind of re-engage with reading books, not looking at screens.
Which is good, because it just slows down the mind.
Yeah.
Because when you're on the screen, your mind just winding up quite a few times. So
I've had a lot of fun, with my library card over the last few years. Like, man, I didn't realize the library could do all this stuff. Look at this. And friends who are librarians, like, yes, welcome back, welcome.
Come in.
and there's you can get all sorts of stuff. Through Auckland libraries. I didn't realize they had it. Through your card membership, you can use Beamer Film, which is a streaming service. For independent, like there's a lot of independent film and documentaries. So I did not know. Yeah. So
it's new to me.
And just the research library in Manukau. Yeah, the nerd side of me is like, man, look at all this stuff that I can get a hold of. But being able to be curious and learn a bit more and understand. But I think one of the best things I got over, this period was that reconnection to friends I hadn't seen in a while, and then those networks of people keeping in touch with me, like what we did when we had my online 50th, which was lockdown 50th. That was weird, but at the same time, I was like, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that in the real world because there were friends from overseas.
That's right.
Who were able to be part of that, and just taking those wins and really enjoying them.
It's so good. But that's the whole thing of there's a way around it, because obviously your amazing wife organised all that behind your back. So it was a good surprise for you, but also it still put value on you as a person as well, especially with all the craziness of what we've been through over the whole world has been through for the last 2 and a bit years. So just having those sweet moments, just a pause, but also reconnect as well, which is a big thing. Reconnect with your family, reconnect with people overseas.
Yep.
And I guess that's a journey that everyone's back on now, just reconnecting, retelling stories, but also sitting down and making new stories and making new memories. So
I think it's also the fact that we've gone through all of this and we're like, where to now? But it's also, we do this together. We have these talanoa, these conversations, and we'll try and figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'd say, going back and teaching and having the camera and doing these things with people like Frankie and, all these other amazing photographers. My cousin Soteria Iramia, she did that program. We didn't even know we were cousins. Samoans.
Samoans. We're going to get to that fact. Yeah, we were Samoans related.
We're related. That's why I married a Greek. But it was like, she came at this program not as a photographer. So she works in science and education. And she wanted to do this. And before I knew we were related, I was like, well, why not? And the work she produced on that program was just incredible. Everyone produced some really amazing work.
Yeah.
And it was work that was from our perspective.
Yeah.
And when it was shown to the 7 Academy overseas, who are based in Europe and the US, it's the story. They were like, they looked at all the images and they were like, these are there's something different in here.
Yeah.
And what I realized is the alofa that's woven through our cultures comes through everything we touch, and it's in those images.
That's so good.
So when you see Soteria's amazing images of her parents, you know, and you look at what Nick Netzler's done and what Frankie's done and Ems and, you know, everyone else that's involved in that, you know, it's been... Yeah, an amazing journey.
Yeah, so good. Well, obviously we've got to wrap it up, but no, we've had some really. We can go on for years, but but it's to be honest, Ray, it's been a privilege having you in, and hopefully for those who are listening, hopefully will feel encouraged by a lot of the gold that we've taken out of this, and you know, at the same time, you know, being real about the circumstances that we've been through the last wee while, but also leaning on some of that knowledge that we've gained over the years. So also, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh man, I love you also.
And I love you, man. So good. Thanks everyone. Take care. Man, that was an incredible time with Raymond. Just hearing the insight from his past, but also the journey he's been on. And one of the big takeaways I've had from him is really around the whole thing of actually just being able to take what you've learnt from your past and apply that to your present. And I love the fact that he was able to sit down with his uncle Johnny and take on insight from him, but also the fact that he actually used a lot of the insight to pass on to those he's mentoring at the moment. So man, powerful stuff. So do that, take on what you can learn, and also pass it on to someone else so they can be encouraged and inspired to actually do the same.